Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with our concept of scarcity, and our ultimate goal is to increase individual and societal overall welfare. We understand that markets are any place, physical or virtual, where buyers and sellers that can make an exchange, and that buyers and sellers will make exchanges when it benefits them. That's the idea behind supply and demand. However, what happens when we put a whole bunch of people together that are all self interested? They all have different wants and needs, and there are different factors of production everywhere, different land, different labor, different capital, these different resources. Well, now we got to take everything that we have learned and we need to actually create some kind of system that's going to run this, some kind of big overall system. And those systems are going to have to be protected by laws, and governments are going to have to start to come into an existence to make sure these economic systems can run. An economic system is a method used by society to decide how to produce and distribute goods and services. So society gets together and says, okay, we understand we have different people. They're all self interested. They all have different wants and needs. There's all kinds of different factors of production. How, as a society, do we actually decide how to produce and distribute goods and services? So society has different land, different labor, different capital. And with that different land, labor, and capital, it makes some questions kind of come up. Number one, I have this land, labor, and capital. What am I going to make? What am I going to produce? How's it going to satisfy the needs and wants of the people? Do we make goods or services? Do we produce more guns than butter or vice versa? Number two, how am I going to produce this? How much and what type of human capital do I need? What kind of skills and knowledge are going to be necessary? Also, how much and what type of physical capital? What kind of tools or technology that will be needed to make this thing? When are we going to produce this? Is this something we make constantly, or do we make it just occasionally? Is this a seasonal thing? Is it something we can make at night? I mean, some simple things. When do you produce it? Where's this going to be produced? Does it need a specific location? Does geography really matter? Does climate? Would it be better if I produced this thing out of the country, somewhere where costs are cheaper? Are there better skills somewhere else? Where is it going to be produced? And finally, who's actually going to consume whatever I produce? So I have these questions. What will be produced? How will it be produced? When will it be produced? Where will it be produced? And who will actually consume it? And now we come up with the ideas who actually within society is going to answer these questions about factors of production. Well, we have two radically different ends of the economic spectrum in terms of a system. Number one is a command economy. This is also known as socialism. This is where those economic questions, what, how, where, when, and who's going to consume it, are answered according to the government. Government basically controls all economic activity. Some examples of a socialist economy are North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela. Okay. Are there benefits to a socialist style economy? And the answer is sure there are. Government being involved does have an advantage. One, there could be greater equality because the government can pass out their resources and goods and services to create that equality. When the government makes decisions, it creates a common sense of a purpose with the resources. We all are together at this, and we're going to make sure that it all works. Often the government can actually mobilize resources quicker. Like they don't have to wait for the market to respond. They just jump in and go, bam, okay, we're going to put our resources together in like a time of war and do it really fast. And eventually, governments can help prevent a monopoly. And of course, a monopoly is a single supplier that dominates the market. So the government can go in and say, "Up, nope, no monopoly here. We're breaking that up." Okay. So, of course, there's elements of government making decisions in the United States, whether it's healthcare coverage or Social Security. Obviously, the U.S. military, even Ukiah High School is an example of the government making decisions of what to do with production and consumption of resources. Okay, are there disadvantages? Of course, your individual needs are and wants are going to have a lower priority than the overall good of society, and we don't even know what that necessarily means in some cases. You're going to have less choice. because when the government ends up making the choices, the government can become the monopoly. Like schools. I mean, most schools are run by the government. The government is kind of a monopoly of schools. Resources owned by the government are often wasted or misused because the government has its own priorities, and the government isn't going to know what to do with your skills better than you will. Also creates less innovation overall because people don't have the incentive to innovate if they're not going to get a direct benefit of that. And of course, corruption increases. When governments make decisions, of course, their priority, governments are run by people. And so people are going to take advantage of that. Okay, so when you get places like North Korea or Cuba or Venezuela, you're going to see a lot more oppression. You're going to see more poverty. You're going to see stuff flying off of shelves, hyperinflation, and a lot of economic systems where government makes a lot of the decisions. The other side of this is called a free market economy. This is otherwise known as capitalism. This is where the what to produce, how, when, where, and who will consume, those are answered by producers and consumers, buyers and sellers, basic supply and demand without government interference. This is where individual choice determines what to produce and consume. Where do you see this? Well, if you go to other countries, you'll see street vendors where the government has no influence on what's going on. Those will be an example of free markets. You know, if you go to Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or the dark web, slum cultures are very free market oriented as well. Are there advantages? Well, yeah, resources are just used more efficiently in free market economies because the producers produce what they want in the quantity they know they can sell, and they know that the self interest is actually driving the choices of the buyer and the seller. The buyer wants satisfaction, or the buyer wants satisfaction, utility. The seller wants profit, and we know that. And so they're going to use resources efficiently. There's going to be a lot more choice out there because people are dynamic and want to make a profit. You're going to have that idea of making a profit is going to have a greater incentive to innovate, to create more and better technologies. And of course, when you have more competition, there's going to be lower prices out there. So free markets usually have lower prices in their economic systems. Where do you see again free markets? Again, street vendors, often Facebook Marketplace where you can find all kinds of different um, stuff to buy or sell. And of course, when we get into even to lower end economies, when the ability to say like, I want some soup, and then they'll paddle up next to you in a place like Vietnam or Cambodia, and you make an exchange for something. It's simple free market at work. Is there problems? Of course there is. If you don't have government, then you don't really have property rights. You don't have any laws. You don't have any contracts to make sure that that exchange is fair, that everybody there has the right information to make an exchange. Free markets create greater inequality. There's a reason why Jeff Bezos, who made Amazon, has way more money than you do because he made a, a product that succeeded a lot, but it does create a sense of inequality. Monopolies can exist and are created by the free market. When somebody does really well, they dominate the market, then they are able to set prices in production because they're the only one available. And then you don't have any public goods out there, public meaning government. So, who defends the country if you don't have a military? If there's no public education, how do people get educated? Who makes roads? Who makes airports? Who makes air traffic control? Who makes freeways? Those kinds of things. Okay. And of course, you'll see the inequality when you look at places like slums. So we have Mexico City, we have Karachi in Pakistan, and you have Mumbai in India. You can see the inequality in terms of massive slums that are dominant free market forms, but you'll also have the very wealthy parked right next to them. Okay. Now, question: is the United States a pure free market economy, and is North Korea a pure command economy? And the answer is neither of these really exist. It's government intervention at what margin? How much does government make the choice? And how much do consumers and producers make a choice on what to do? So the United States and most countries around the world are what are called mixed economies. Yes, in the United States, you do have the freedom to choose to be a producer and what to produce, and you have the freedom to choose to buy and what to buy. So this is an example of how the free market exists in the United States. But it also has some elements of a command economy. You have labor laws, minimum wage, health laws. You do have a military and education. You have taxes that are taken out. All these are examples of, look, we have elements of free markets and elements of socialist command economies that exist. And around the world, socialist, pure socialism, even those economies have black markets that work outside of the economic system. And in capital, there's very, very rarely any pure capitalist system out there. It's just how much does government control the choices that are made? Those questions, the what, how, when, where to produce, and who will consume. And then how, much should the buyers and sellers make that choice? And these are elements of mixed economies. So as we go through, we're not going to be, making the question of, which one of these is better, socialist or pure socialist or pure capitalist. The answer is, at what margin should government be involved where we can make the best overall decisions of dealing with scarcity in society?